Hey everyone. I hope you all are doing well and I hope that you guys can hear me. Let me make sure my volume is working. Looks like everything's working. Welcome to this Sunday's live stream. Now, my name is Brittany Lewis. I'm a professional artist, a graphic designer, and tarot enthusiast. And Sundays are usually the day that I spend working on my dream project, the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. But today is part two of me reacting to videos from 2013 to present from my YouTube channel. And it's been quite a ride. I enjoyed it so much last week that we decided to make it a part two today. Now, if you're interested in watching these videos on your own, there is going to be a playlist linked in the description, as well as some more information about myself, the services that I offer, the tools that I use as I create digital illustrations. All of that information will be linked below. Now, before we get into what we're going to get into, if you'd like to support this channel, don't forget to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. That helps me out a whole lot. And if you'd like to support financially by purchasing something from my shop, please visit blewisarts.com. All of that again will be down in the description. Now, this channel, for those of you who missed part one, that'll also be in the description. But just in case you missed part one, this channel started in about 2013, and it started as a result of me enjoying watching the creation process of other artists, but also not being satisfied with the art that was being created. I didn't see myself represented, and that's a thing that sort of shows up in my creative career. Since the beginning, right? And so, with that, the videos that I have on this channel fall under three categories. They're usually acrylic paintings, they're usually ink portraits, or they're my digital illustrations. Now, we ended last Sunday in 2016. I think our last video was the Shaolin Fantastic from the Get Down. That one was created in 2016. Today, we're going to start in the year 2017. We're going to look at Calypso from the Pirates of the Caribbean. This is, I think, was one of the first pieces that I created that year. I believe this was from January of 2017. So this is the very first one. Calypso is probably one of my favorite on-screen characters. You know, I love witchy things, right? So I definitely think that Naomi Campbell did a fantastic job portraying this character. And so I would love to show you guys the process. Now, in this painting, more disclaimer, and I'll pause this, as the things progress. We'll watch some of these sped up. We'll also watch some of these in real time. So we'll just kind of mix and match. And I'll probably pause on occasion to give some tidbits of information about how things were created. Now, this particular illustration was completed in Photoshop CS5. Again, this was in 2017. So I think by then, Adobe had already adopted the subscription model, but I had an old version of Photoshop, and that's what I did the majority of my digital illustrations in at the time. And I used a method in this particular video which allowed me to create the portrait in black and white. And in black and white, what I did was, after the values and things were settled and I was happy with the way that it looked in black and white and grayscale, I would then apply color and do the finishing touches. And since then, I've sort of evolved into a just painting directly. But this is one of the techniques that I had back then. And so I'm so happy to share with you guys. We're going to take a look at Calypso from 2017. So without further ado, let me switch on over to my other screen here so you guys can see what I'm looking at. And we're going to get into it. Now, I see there is one person watching. If that one person would help me out a little bit, and let's make sure that you guys can hear the volume of this video. I think it'll let me see, but we're going to start. Here we go. So painting in the way that I'm painting here, where I'm doing the black and white or the grayscale before we get to the color, was probably one of my favorite ways of ensuring that things look the way it was supposed to look. Because sometimes when we're painting in color, especially if you're direct painting like this, the first thing that you do, it's easy to sort of lose dimension because sometimes, and it just kind of depends on how you train your eye, it can be difficult to sort of distinguish the value of certain things, right? So you can have a blue and a red next to each other, but they can represent the same level of lightness or darkness. And so you can lose a little bit of dimension and a little bit of, foreground, the differentiation between your foreground and your background and your middle ground in doing so. And so one of the ways that I sort of trained myself in, just practicing that particular skill set is to, hey, Lee says the audio is a bit laggy. I'm sorry. Hopefully it's, a live stream ain't a live stream without some glitches. So I hope that that fixes itself. Let me move my phone, make sure nothing is like interrupting anything. But one of the ways that I sort of trained myself to get used to creating dimension within my pieces was that I would actually do everything in grayscale first, and then I would go on top of it with a gradient map, which means that for each sort of tone on the grayscale value from stark white to all the way to, extremely dark black, I would assign a color to that, right? And then from there, I would add more dimension to the piece. I would add, more color variation, but my black and white was sort of my solid foundation for that. So I think we're halfway through this video, but let's keep going and let me know, Lee, if it's still laggy. And thank you so much. I'm so happy to see you. Okay, so I'm going to show you what that gradient map looks like. So I attempted at first to just sort of paint the color directly on top of the black and white image, but it wasn't working as smoothly as it does with a gradient map. So once we got to about right here, where it says preset gradient editor, that is where I assigned all of the lights and darks of the grayscale image a color tone or color value. And so that's pretty much what I would do. And then after that, because of course there are certain things that I don't want certain colors, you would go back and edit and make sure that, like, the teeth, for instance, weren't brown, right? Or like the whites of the eyes may have had color, a different tone of color, and then you would add blush and things like that to represent heat and to also help it stand out. But that's pretty much what it looks like. In Photoshop I had like a whole selection of gradients that I would choose from, and that's showing here in the presets menu. Where I had all of these custom gradients that I had sort of built over the years to help me give each of my black and white or my grayscale illustrations dimension. And so that's sort of how I would do portraits. Nowadays, I just kind of directly paint the colors because I've had, plenty of practice in creating those types of images. But yeah, that's sort of how I evolved as a digital artist. And so for those seeing that link that is no longer active. But I've come a long, long way as an artist, sort of selling my merchandise and things like that. But if you are interested in something like, I do believe I have the Calypso print still available on my website. So if there's something that you like or would like to have a copy of, if it's there, it is there for you. If not, be sure to send me a DM and I can get an order out for you as soon as possible. But our next picture is an original piece. So this is where I began to sort of experiment a little bit with telling my own sort of story. Now, I've had a few pieces over the years on this channel where I sort of dug into my own imagination and or was inspired by something that I would see and I would create art around it. This is one such example. Now, what ended up happening was I was scrolling through Instagram and I came across an Instagrammer by the name of Hippie Heathen, I believe is her name. And she was in a yoga pose. And I don't know what it was about this pose, but it just gave me fairy vibes, right? And I was so inspired by it. And so I decided to create an image from it. Now, again, this is sort of one of those things where I was able to mix and mash together inspiration from, all over the place in order to create this composition. And I think it came out really well. And it's one of those things where, as an artist, you evolve. And so I can kind of see some of where I would have changed or like done better. But this is a picture that to me is very timeless, definitely a classic. And I, still enjoy it to this day. So without further ado, this is Lotus Blossom. And that was Lotus Blossom. She is again one of I guess I say this a lot, but she is one of my favorite illustrations that I've done. So I'm going to categorize it. She's one of my favorite original illustrations that I've done. Now, again, as an artist, I can kind of see sort of where I would change things and where things would be a little bit different if I were to paint the same picture again. It actually just kind of brings to mind the idea that maybe some of these illustrations will revisit and we redraw just to sort of see where I've come or how far I've come as an illustrator and specifically as a digital illustrator over the years. But again, that was Lotus Blossom from 2017. Our next video, I'm probably going to speed up just a little bit, but this is Ojuju in the IO Masquerade. This was done by, I forget the name of the comic company. It escapes me. It'll come back to me. But I did this for a comic company many years ago, I believe, the same year, 2017, where they gave me sort of the plot to their story. They did not specify to me that this was going to be a cover. And that's one of those lessons that I learned, the hard way. Sometimes you got to get all the information, but I was so excited to be able to work on a comic. This company was based in Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria. So I was able to sort of do a couple of covers for them. I think 3 pieces total, and this is one of them. I like this because it goes back into telling a story in your art. I think Lotus Blossom does that as well. There's a story in that illustration. And with Ojuju and the IO Masquerade, there's a story here. Now, with this illustration, because I had just sort of the basic idea of what was happening in this particular story, it's specifically the comic. It was up to me to sort of figure out how I wanted to illustrate it, right? So in this video, you will see me sort of go through the process of changing and configuring the composition to make sure that everything sort of makes sense as it goes. And so without further ado, this is Io and the Juju Masquerade. And again, we're going to speed this up just a little bit. Just a little bit. So generally speaking, whenever someone is commissioning me for artwork, since then, right, what will happen is that I'll have a sort of a composition, or not a composition. I'll have sort of a consultation with that person. We'll go through the whole story, whatever it is that they're looking for, and then what I will do is actually present them with the final sketch. Now, in this video, we kind of jump ahead a little bit because I go from sketching to completely doing, of course, the method of doing the grayscale value illustration first. But let's say, for instance, you guys commission me to do your children's book. Before we even get into the color, before I get into the full rendering and layout of the book, what I would do is sit down with you and talk about it, go page for page, and then I will create the compositions very much like this, but this will actually, again, change over the course of this video. But we'll go through it. I'll sketch everything out. And then once things are sketched out, then I will offer it to you as my client to approve. And then we make changes and we go along like that. I do that because what happens is if I were to go ahead and paint this straight out, let's say we're using Ojuju as our example. If we were to go and paint this particular picture straight out, my client may not be happy with it. So in this case, I didn't know that this was going to be a comic book cover. I didn't charge comic book cover pricing, but that was sort of a learning experience for me. And yes, this was 2017. I had been in business for a minute, but this was a new situation for me. So what that taught me was that before we even get to any of the sort of artwork or any of that, to make sure that the expectations and the deliverables are extremely clear before we get to the next step. And then, of course, my clients have to approve each step of the way. So let me get back to it. Let me stop talking. So that is on Juju and the IO Masquerade. So I really enjoyed this particular piece because again, there's a story there, right? And so that's something I've sort of leaned into as I've created or began working through the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. I want to make sure that each card has sort of a story that follows it. What exactly are we seeing? So everything's left to imagination to sort of read what's happening in this particular piece. And I think this one is super dynamic. It is one that I enjoy. It is one that I have hanging hanging up in my house. I do enjoy the IO Masquerade. All right, so our next piece is Akuma. This is an acrylic painting, and this has since sold. I used to do 6x8 acrylics for comic book conventions, in addition to all of the other art that I would create for conventions. And so this will be one of my bigger ticket items because this was a traditional painting, 6x8 in acrylics. I do enjoy this as well. Again, I say this a lot. I will say that this is one of my favorite, how would I say, video game pieces. Let's categorize it as that. All right, so without further ado, this is Akuma. I don't know how long this video is, so we may or may not watch it sped up. But again, acrylic on 6x8. And so I guess the first thing to say about this is the part that you guys missed is the actual drawing on the canvas. By the time I got to this part of my sort of YouTube journey and creating videos of the art that I would complete, I just would not I had so many of them where you would see me drawing. So what ended up happening is I would draw on the canvas, and this was a canvas board, right? I would draw on it and then I would outline in black. I used to not do that. And what would happen is as soon as I put water to canvas, whether it's with paint or just to sort of wet the canvas, things would get very muddy very quickly. So I remedied that by using marker outlines. And I do that to this day. It definitely helps to sort of keep the sketch in place. And then it also helps to make sure that when I'm painting, things are as opaque as possible, because what will happen is, especially with like a thicker canvas, if you don't have enough paint in it, if I hold it up to the light, you'll begin to sort of see through the canvas. And so having that marker there sort of makes sure that I have enough paint on the surface.
Dark music.
All right. I hope you guys can hear me. Let me check. PL, let me know that you guys cannot hear. Let's see. All right. My mic seems to be working okay. Let me know, PL or Lee, if you're still there. Anyone else who's in the chat, give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. I'll give it a second because I do know that there is a little bit of a lag. All right. All right, well, we'll keep moving on. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I am showing that my sort of there it is. Okay, so that meter's working. All right, we're gonna move on. Alrighty, so the next video is going to be from the Game of Thrones. Now, I did these around the end of the Game of Thrones series. Of course, I was a big old fan of the Game of Thrones, as many people were. I wanted to create the characters, and I had intended to do more than the two that we're going to watch today. But by the end of it, I was so disappointed by the end of this show that I just stuck to the two. The way that I approached these was, of course, to draw them right out, but I wanted to sort of change the style of the characters. So I gave them tattoos. I gave them sort of the rockabilly. I'm hoping I'm saying it right, but sort of the rock and roll Grease sort of motifs. And I think they came out pretty well. So our very first one again is going to be Daenerys Targaryen from the Game of Thrones. I do enjoy this a whole lot. This is another one where I think where I started, I can kind of see where things could have been better as an artist, but I really, really enjoyed this illustration, and I hope you guys enjoy it as well. So I think in this video, fun fact, this was one of the first times that I ever gone live, and I was actually doing through Instagram live, and I was working specifically on her hair. What I learned, and I don't know if I learned this during this particular painting, but something I sort of came to the realization of while I was painting this is that when it comes to straight hair textures, I have a very difficult job painting them. So I've watched all kinds of tutorials, and I think I even watched one around the time that I was working on this to sort of figure out how exactly to paint straight hair. For me, when it comes to Afro textured hair, it's a lot easier because there's a lot more texture. So what I've learned is that it's best when doing straight hair to do it in sort of clumps and shapes, right? And so that's what I pretty much did. But yeah, this was one of my very, very first live streams that I did on Instagram. Just in general, the very first one I ever did, but I did it to sort of get over the fear of creating in front of people. It was a lot of fun. It was very tedious, and I think the people that had an opportunity to watch me create this live got a new appreciation for how tedious some of this actually is. Because I do know that there is a misconception that, of course, digital painting is easier or takes less skill than traditional painting. And as someone who does both, I think I have spent easily much more time on digital illustrations than anything I've ever created traditionally, because with traditional work, you can sort of get away a little bit more with the ideas of things, right? So if I'm painting hair, I'm not necessarily concerned with the actual strands and things like that. Whereas with digital, because it can be blown up or it could be sort of reduced in size, that kind of thing matters to me anyway. Now, as I progressed as an artist, of course, I found ways to sort of navigate that so that it is more in line with the traditional work that I do. But this was definitely one of the things that I did sort of live, and people were like, "Oh, I didn't know it took so long." It does. And that was Daenerys Targaryen from the Game of Thrones. And up next, of course, what is Daenerys without Jon Snow? So, in very much the same style and the same sort of idea, created Jon Snow exactly the same with tattoos and the leather jacket and the whole thing. I think the most satisfying part of this particular illustration is probably going to be the texture that I was able to achieve in his leather jacket. Now, of course, I think I was going for a photorealistic style when it comes to when it came to this particular piece, and that is something that I sort of shoot for from time to time with my digital portraits. But I think this one came out really well. So without further ado, this is Jon Snow. was super satisfying. To make sure I wasn't on mute. That was super duper satisfying. Again, I used the technique where I would paint and create in grayscale and then go back over with a gradient map in order to sort of add color and flesh tones. But it does not stop there. Once you add the gradient map, you definitely have to sort of nuance and add, flesh tones and warmth and cool tones and things like that to your lights and shadows. But again, one of my favorite aspects of this particular illustration is the fact that I was able to capture a leather feel in his jacket. That is so satisfying to me. All right, so our next video. Now, this next painting, we're definitely going to speed up because if I'm remembering correctly, I believe this one is a 12-minute long video. Now, this was commissioned by a Mr. Phillips from Chattanooga, Tennessee, on behalf of his reenactment group who celebrate, I believe it's I don't want to misquote. So I'm going to click on it, then we're going to read the description because it's been so long. But I've done 3 of these. This is an American Civil War soldier who marched through my hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've done 3. This one is by far my favorite by a long shot. The final image, I believe, was a 16 by 20. By the time I got to the 3rd one, I did not record the 3rd one. And I think the guy who posed for the 3rd one was a little disappointed that I did not record it. I do regret it. I wish I had. But again, this is the 2nd one that I've done and also my favorite. So for sure, we are going to go ahead and let me see. I'm going to click on it and then we're going to speed it up. And we're going to watch this. Again, I love being able to sort of create texture within my stories. And even though this is a posed portrait, it was done from a photograph, it's definitely one that I believe also tells a story. And so being able to tell a story throughout my illustrations and throughout my paintings is such a big thing for me because I'm able to sort of express more of myself. Of course, again, this one was posed by the person in the picture. We're going to click on it and see how it goes. Without further ado, this is the American Civil War soldier in acrylic, and this is a 16 by 20. And that is from 2018. So, just a little bit of backstory. I pulled up the video so that you guys can sort of know a little bit about what it was that I was painting. So, this is a soldier or a person in reenactment or reenacting a Union soldier in the 44th U.S. Colored Troops Regiment. So, it says the 44th U.S. Colored Troops Regiment. Union soldiers were based, of course, out of my hometown, Chattanooga, Tennessee. This regiment consisted of over 3,000 African American soldiers fighting in the United States Civil War. And I don't know about you guys, but I had no idea. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Of course, we would see like the cannons and the Civil War monuments and things like that scattered around town. But I had no idea that there was such a large population of African American soldiers right there in town. It's not something that we learned about in school. It's not something that you would read about on the different placards or anything like that. So it's thanks to troops such as this one who do the reenactments, who sort of go out and tell the story of these people who fought right alongside Union soldiers in the American Civil War, that we sort of know and can keep that tradition or sort of keep that story alive. Again, I did 3 of these. This is certainly one of my favorite. I think there's so much personality here and there's so much story to tell. And without further ado, let's move on. So our next painting is the seer. Now I don't know why I'm having deja vu, but I could have sworn I did this one already. But it might be because I shared it recently. Now, earlier when we looked at the lotus blossom, I did mention maybe going back and revisiting some of the artwork, and maybe that's something that we'll do coming. Sort of give me a break between the give me a break while I work on the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. The Seer is one of a few that I had in mind, a few ideas that I had tinkering around of a group of women that I call the Daughters of Ascension. Again, she is titled The Seer. And again, I use the same technique in my digital illustration where I was able to create her in a grayscale illustration and then come back later with color. Now, when I do this, and I'm watching this, there's sort of a thing that I noticed was happening, and one of the reasons why, aside from just sort of learning how to paint without doing this, but one of the reasons why I stopped using this particular technique is because to me it always has sort of a grayish undertone to it, because of course everything is sort of from black and white, and even if you lay a gradient on top of it, it still kind of has a certain look, right? And so I actually much prefer to have a locally painted illustration, meaning that if the skin is brown, instead of me doing a black and white version of that skin tone, then I go into actually painting the brown skin as we've watched me do, excuse me, while working on the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. So I do want to go back and revisit this illustration. I do remember this one being particularly challenging because again, this is one that I did from imagination, and I just had I was having some hiccups with this, but it came out really beautiful. It is one of the two or one of the few that I would like to go back and repaint. So that will be a lot of fun to sort of see the progression. And so without further ado, this is the seer. Now, one of the things that you guys may notice, and this came up with the Ojuju and the Ayo Masquerade, is that as I'm sketching, I'm usually leaving notes to myself. And I do this actually as to this day. I'll leave notes to myself about what it is that I would like to create. So I know that we had a live stream a while back with Sam and Lee, and we talked a little bit about nailing down your light source. Well, as I was drawing this, I had an idea of where I wanted the light to come from so that I would know which parts of the face, which parts of the bird would show light, which parts would be in light and which parts will be in shadow. So if we're looking at my face right now, there's a light source sort of right in front of me that's sort of shining down, and it's making one side of my face much lighter than the other, and then on my left side there is a little bit of shadow. So we made the determination pretty early on, and I left notes for myself. Of course, the notes don't stay in the final piece. But this is one way that if I have an idea and I have a sketch and I draw the sketch and may not revisit, completing the picture, this is one of the ways to sort of keep up with the initial ideas that I have. I'll leave myself notes all day, every day. So here is the seer. So that is the seer, and it's definitely one that I'm going to revisit. It's been on my mind to do. I really love the story of this, as we've mentioned before. In this particular live stream, one of the things that I think for me is most satisfying about creating artwork is to be able to tell a story, right? And so there is so much here, and I want to explore it. I probably, if I were to redo it, I probably paint this exact same composition. As I'm looking at it, there are things, of course, that as an artist I would change. One of the troubles that I had was sort of the angle of her face. Again, I didn't have a reference for this. This was all from imagination. I did have a reference for the bird. And then the background was actually a photo that I was able to sort of manipulate into the image itself. I will probably paint all of this over again. And I think that I want to do that. So be on the lookout for that particular video coming at some point, probably 2025. We'll get around to that because I really, really want to do this one again. And I kind of want to do the lotus blossom again as well. All right, so let's move on. So the next picture was created on behalf of my son who requested Mike Tyson. Now, we've all at this point seen either the fight itself or snippets and reviews of his most recent fight. But before he got to that point, he was Iron Mike. He's still Iron Mike Tyson. This is probably one of, I think this is the actual last ink portrait that I had did to date. I think before this one was Carrie Fisher, and I think this was the absolute last one I've done. So I have not done an ink portrait since this one. Obviously, this is again one of my one of my favorites. I guess in terms of ink portraits, if I had to name my top three, I would say Eartha Kitt is number one. Mike Tyson is number two, and Bob Marley would probably be number three. But I have a lot of them, and if you're interested in seeing some more of those, be sure to check out the channel because there are over 88 art videos, and we're just barely scratching the surface of some of the things that I've created over the years. But without further ado, this is Iron Mike Tyson in India ink. India ink, yeah, on paper. was Iron Mike Tyson in India ink again. This was the last India ink portrait that I have done, and this was completed in 2018. All right, so up next we have not Bob Marley, child. We have Bruce Lee. Now, again, a lot of these images, especially when it comes to the fan art, was designed specifically for comic book conventions because for a very long time that was how I got my art out to the public. This next painting is no exception to this. This is another one of the big ticket items that I would have. So if you're interested in doing sort of an artist alley setup at a comic book convention, one of the things that I recommend doing is having sort of tiered pricing items. Now, of course, the little trinkets, the keychains, and things like that do exceptionally well, especially if they're priced sort of $10 or below. If you can have something like that, if you can also have something above that, maybe a $20 print, and then something that is a big ticket item, that sort of helps to cover the cost of travel and all of the things that comes with doing comic book conventions. And so one of the ways that I did that was to do these actual everything was hand done, but these traditional acrylic portraits. I believe this one was the last of its kind as well. The Bruce Lee was the last 6x8 acrylic portrait that I had done for this purpose. It also sold. Most of them have sold. I think the only two that I have or I have three that have not sold. One was a Deadpool portrait, which I didn't really like, but I have it, and the other two is a Thanos and Pennywise from it. But of all the rest that I've ever done, they've all sold successfully. I really liked doing these because I got sort of a break in doing my digital portraits and things like that. So I kind of was able to create something relatively small, relatively quickly, and people tended to respond well to them. So without further ado, this is Bruce Lee in acrylics. So that was Bruce Lee from 2018. I'm just sitting here watching some of these videos with you guys. And I remember having the sort of the self-talk that, oh, I don't post every day. I don't make art videos every day. I must have trouble with consistency. But I think watching these videos back is a testament that consistency doesn't have to be every single day, right? Consistency is creating art and not ever stopping to create, stopping, creating art or being creative in any capacity for since 20. I've been doing this much longer than, but making videos since 2013 and showcasing that skill set. And I'm just sort of proud of myself. Y'all, I really am. I don't know if that sounds conceited or not. It doesn't matter. I am very, very much proud of myself. And it is a testament that you can do it too. I'm not anybody special or anything like that. It's just that I chose to consistently do the thing that I enjoy doing. And it didn't look like every day, of course. I've told the story of the B90X series where I challenged myself to do the 90 paintings a day and I didn't last 10. But I have art is one of the things that has always been around in my life. So our very next painting is the very last painting in this series. This is Keela. The backstory to this is that this is a portrait of a young woman who was found by her family, no longer alive. And it is one of many portraits that I've had the honor of doing for people to help them in the grieving process. I've done so many portraits of people who have transitioned and passed on. And it's always an honor and always a pleasure to do that, and pleasure to be able to offer something to a family that they can cherish from now until that sort of helps them bring a bit of closure. So this is Keela, and this is the final video in this series. And that was Keela from 2018. And that concludes our video series, my reaction to videos and art from 2013 to about 2018. Now, it does not stop there. This channel has about 88 art videos, and we only scratched the surface. So if you are interested in seeing more of that, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. There is a playlist linked in the description where you will see all of the videos that we have reacted to over these last 2 Sundays. And if it is something that you're interested in seeing more of, be sure to leave me a comment below. I would love to hear about it because again, we've done I think 34 videos in this 2 weeks, but there are 88 total. So there's certainly room for more reactions and more things like that. There are also more recent art pieces as well. So if you did enjoy this, please be sure to leave a thumbs up and check the description for all of the relevant information, and make sure you hit the notification bell when you subscribe. And I appreciate you for being here because on this beautiful Sunday, whether you're watching this live or the replay, you could be doing anything that you chose to kick it with me. And I do so much appreciate that. So without further ado, until next week, we're going to be working back on the Cosmic Gateways Tarot. We're going to be starting on a new set of cards, which I'm very, very excited about. We spent so much time on the Two of Wands, but I'm excited to show you all the completed version of that. And without further ado, I will not overtalk it, but I thank you so, so much for watching. And until next week, peace.